Hello, everyone. This is your host, Akil Jabbar, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS District. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how to scale your MRR using CRO and PPC for your SaaS company. Today, we have our guest, Dylan Hay, joining us. Dylan is the co-founder and CEO of HeyDigital, which is a creative PPC and CRO agency that focuses on helping SaaS and B2B tech companies scale revenue with PPC and paid social advertising campaigns. After successfully managing hundreds of thousands of dollars in spending on Google, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Campterra for a lot of customers, Dylan has built an effective SaaS-specific advertising process that just works. Dylan is also the podcast host of the SaaS Marketing Show, where you can learn practical marketing and growth strategies from leading marketing experts in SaaS Founders. So welcome, Dylan. Super excited to have you on our show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Akil. Thanks for the comprehensive intro as well. I'm excited to be on your show. I've been listening and watching it for a little while now. So yeah, excited to chat with you today.
I appreciate that. Now, for those of you who don't know about your background, people in our audience have never heard about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you discovered the opportunity for launching HeyDigital? I think it was in 2018.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned in the intro, I launched HeyDigital back in 2018. And previous to that, I was working in various different kind of marketing, growth, biz dev, sales roles within SaaS companies. So just before HeyDigital, I was with a company called Leadfeeder, which is a website visitor identification platform. I was maybe the 12th or 13th member of the team there, focusing on business development, growth, everything that goes into that across the UK and Europe. So that was really fun. In a really short period of time, we grew a lot. Just within the first year that I was there, we went from 13, 14 employees to 50. We had a team across, I think it was 8 or 9 different time zones. So that was really fun. And before that, I was working at Hootsuite, the social media management platform, working within the enterprise sales focused team there. And so when I was building out or supporting the team at Leadfeeder as they were growing and building out my own personal brand too, because that was a big part of our kind of strategy for growth at Leadfeeder, it became super, super clear that every time I was speaking at different events, doing different podcasts, YouTube shows, whatever it might be, there would always be SaaS companies or founders that would say, hey, maybe you could support us with some of our kind of marketing initiatives. And when I looked at the team at Leadfeeder, we had a very, very small marketing team at that point. So as my brand was growing, I was getting more people asking me to work with them. It came to the point where, as awesome as it was to work with the team at Leadfeeder, and they've been on a great growth trajectory even since I left too, it just didn't make sense for me to keep turning people away. So I decided to set up my own business. When we first started back in 2018, 2.5 years ago officially, I knew that I would focus on SaaS companies because that was my experience, the kind of businesses that I worked with. I knew the target persona very, very well. We just weren't sure exactly what the best offering was going to be that would fit with that market. We knew it'd be something related to marketing or growth. So we first started with some lead gen projects, some content projects, some paid ads projects. And very early on, it became super clear that PPC, paid ads, is an area where these SaaS companies that are at that kind of mid stage or early stage, maybe they've raised a seed round or their Series A, usually the marketing team will often only be 3 or 4 people. And if you're trying to build out a paid function, which a lot of people do, especially once they raise funds, because it's a channel that's very clearly and very easy to define and show scalable metrics to investors, which is really important. Also, if you only have a marketing team of 3 or 4 people focusing on all the different initiatives, you don't have someone that has enough time to dedicate to paid channels. So that was one of the issues that we decided to kind of tackle head on. So yeah, that was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, officially we set up. We've been focused purely on PPC for the last 1.5 years and have built out a small team. There is 4 or 5 of us on a full-time basis. We have some other freelancers and contractors that we work with also. And we work primarily with SaaS companies who have raised a Series A round, a seed round, or at least at $1 million in annual recurring revenue and above, because they have some at least proven product market fit and some other factors that we can maybe talk about a little bit later on. So yeah, work with a variety of enterprise businesses, earlier stage companies too.
It makes sense. So I know a lot of people, when they start launching their agency, they kind of decide to focus on, because you have, growth marketing skills across the spectrum, right? You could have done social media marketing, you could have offered website development, but you decided to really focus on, PPC and CRO for SaaS and B2B tech companies. Was there specifically why you decided to focus on your services there?
Yeah, so 2 reasons. One is I felt like that was where the biggest kind of gap was in terms of where marketing teams need the most support and where there weren't too many other SaaS specific marketing, like SaaS specific paid ads agencies. There are a few out there that which are also all great. Like we all like communicate fairly often. But yeah, that was one reason. And the second reason was I have experience myself with like building brand and content and everything else, but I see this constant, maybe not shift, but one thing that's super important to whether it's investors or even bootstrapped founders that are trying to grow is you're always trying to prove some kind of revenue, like ROI from your marketing, right? With paid ads, I'm not going to say it's like the easiest thing in the world because there are so many different ways of attribution that we need to consider, and we have to consider the whole marketing funnel. But paid is a service where it is a lot clearer, that path to ROI and proof that something's working. And if you're going to build a service-based business, one of the things that will ensure that you retain clients for a long period of time is when you're kind of affecting their bottom line and helping that grow. So that was another reason also. And I just knew that with that positioning, with knowing exactly who our target customers are, with working for some of them before and having experience in the sector and really dialing down the messaging into paid, it becomes a lot easier for us to market ourselves as a business and grow as well, rather than being super broad with our services.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, something like if you're tackling SEO, it's harder to justify, seeing the ROI for a while versus with PPC, you can see it pretty instantly. At Horizon Capital, one of our playbooks is CRO, or conversion rate optimization. Usually that's the first marketing channel we apply because we look at it like the lowest hanging fruit and generates the quickest wins to see some increase in revenue after the acquisition. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you guys do for CRO? What does that look like? What are some general areas you see maybe SaaS companies failing at that you come in and say, hey, we should optimize for?
Yeah, great question. So we are still building out our kind of CRO offering. We don't have that as a standalone service at this moment in time. But one thing that, of course, when you're working with SaaS companies on their paid funnels, the most important thing before you even consider launching paid ads is like we don't want to fill a leaky bucket, right? So if we spot, like we turn clients away now if they want to work with us, but we take a look at their nurturing flows or their follow-up sequences, or sometimes lack of nurturing flows and follow-up sequences. Like that's a big turn off for us, because those are things that you should focus on first. So for us, the process is kind of like when a client comes to us and they want to work with us, the first things that we take a look at is if they're free trial or if they're demo booking. There are different flows that people will go through, of course, but we look at what that experience is like for a user, because this is really, really important. If you're going to drive paid traffic to a sign-up flow that then has no solid follow-up or no education, or if you're driving people to a demo booking flow where they go to book a demo and then there's like a 24, 48 hour wait time until someone gets back to you and no follow-up emails, etc. Like those are what we're looking at the early stages first before considering working with someone. And we can definitely go a bit deeper onto that if we need to. But then our process is once we're running ads through the testing that we're doing on the campaign levels across the different advertising platforms, the landing pages that we're running, the different ad creatives that we're running too, we'll start to pick up insights from the data to make decisions off the back of data. We're very data driven. Like one challenge in the SaaS world or any world in particular when you're running ads is often people get too attached to their own personal opinions around, I think this creative is better than this one, or I think this headline will work better than this, or maybe this email sequence will work better. But we purely let the data kind of make those decisions for us. So typically when we're looking at CRO and what areas are SaaS companies failing at optimizing for, usually the biggest thing to always audit is the sign-up flow and the sign-up process. Like not just how easy is it to sign up, but what's the process like once someone has signed up? What kind of education is in place to get them actively using the software that you guys have or the tool that you have? And same with demo booking flow. What's that process like? And then off the back of that, we'll start looking for different triggers that we can make optimizations for. So if we're driving traffic from a campaign on Google Ads, for example, focusing on one specific area or tool set within your product, and those people are spending a lot of time on the website, but they're not converting, we'll look at the heat maps, look at why that might be. We'll look at how we can make adjustments in a landing page, etc. So there are a lot of different things to consider. But for me, it's always looking at the clearest route to, usually for SaaS companies, getting somebody to sign up and actively use the product. What can you do to make that as easy as possible for them?
Makes sense. And then on the PPC side, what channels are you generally finding the best success for, say, specifically B2B SaaS companies on an ROI or even on, say, cost per trial or cost per demo basis? Is it, is it LinkedIn, Facebook, Google AdWords? You guys are testing them all. What are you seeing the best results with?
Yeah. So it does vary depending on what kind of space your SaaS company is in and who you're servicing. But the core pillar is always the same for us. So Google on the Google search, Google display, YouTube in some cases, Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, and then the review sites. So Capterra specifically is where most SaaS companies can see a pretty quick and easy return without having to put too much time as well. And the way that we would set things up is you have to consider who your buyer persona is and where they're spending their time. A lot of SaaS founders get nervous, or SaaS marketers get nervous about advertising on Facebook and Instagram, especially the larger kind of enterprise businesses. They'll say, our buyer persona isn't active there, or it doesn't make sense. But we have a number of enterprise clients who have deal sizes in the mid six figures annually recurring. They're servicing these huge enterprise businesses, and for some of them, Facebook is our most successful advertising channel. So it really varies. One thing I would say is to make paid social work, there's a few things you need, which are really important. And when I say paid social, I'm talking specifically about Facebook and Instagram, and then we'll get to LinkedIn in a second. But with Facebook and Instagram, it's super, super important to be feeding the platforms with as much high quality data as you possibly can. So for us, when we're running ads focusing on conversion, which is trial sign up or demo booking, and it's to a cold audience, we use lookalike audiences the most. That's where we do a lot of our testing. And Facebook performs the best when you give it the lookalike audiences that are the highest intent. So usually that's the segment of highest LTV of previous customers that you've had. Maybe it's the recent purchasers or the largest deal sizes that you've completed recently. If you don't have enough data to match an audience for those in Facebook, then we start working backwards and start looking at lookalikes of trial signups or demos booked, for example. But where those platforms come into their own is when you have really good quality data. We see LinkedIn at the moment is definitely an expensive channel, but working well for content promotion specifically. So where we're seeing success on LinkedIn at the moment is with building out content-led campaigns, so promoting ebooks, webinars, guides, etc., and utilizing the LinkedIn lead form functionality. So I don't know how much you know or people listening to this or watching this may know, but LinkedIn have the option to build out and use their own LinkedIn lead forms. So basically someone clicks on the ad, you can choose which data you want to show in the form, and it pre-fills the data. So we'll usually have first name, last name, company size, LinkedIn profile URL, everything will be pre-filled, and the experience for the user is extremely simple. They click on the ad, that is already filled, and then they just press one button, and then it submits the data. They get what they need, and we sync that up with CRM systems using Zapier most of the time because LinkedIn doesn't have the best integrations there. But those campaigns are working very well for getting very good quality traffic into mid and top of funnel flows at the moment. So we'll build out ABM lists or target company lists within LinkedIn and just run the ads specifically to those people. And then Google is our number one place for high intent trial conversion, demo booking conversion, just because you can have so much control over who you're serving ads to, what the messaging is, the landing page experience, etc. So that's a real quick breakdown. I would say we're seeing the most success always most of the time on Google, and that's purely just because that's where most people spend their budget. But as an agency, we see really great success on paid social, Facebook and Instagram, and I think that's because we have half of my team at HeyDigital is creative. So we've really doubled down on high quality creative through video ads, GIFs, carousels, all different bits and pieces. And that's something that you also need to make paid social work is good quality creative specifically for ads. Don't be running 5-minute explainer videos as an ad and expect them to perform. You need snappy creative that's going to move quickly, that you can iterate on really quickly and introduce new ones frequently.
It makes sense. And then you're talking, just going back to Facebook, setting up lookalike audiences and, looking at data there to refine your audience and get better targeting. What is the minimum amount you suggest for, emails or users that you have that you want to upload? Is it, I have heard different things from 50, 100, 150 as a minimum before you want to go back and say, hey, let's use trials instead.
Yeah, so everyone always says different things, and like Facebook says different things sometimes too. Facebook, I think most recently it says that Facebook needs to match at least 100 people in the same location, in the same country. And so for Facebook to match 100 people, you usually need a lot more than 100 people too. That's the key thing to match. So most clients that we'll work with, rarely will they have enough volume of emails to focus it on LTV. Some of them will, some of them won't. So usually we're looking at trials, like previous trial converters and lookalikes of those. But you can always still just try and create the audiences and see what Facebook kind of does. Because sometimes it will let you build a really small audience, and sometimes it will ask for large ones. But often the more data you can give the platform, the better. So I always start with seeing if you can match enough people in the audience of the highest value, and then like working gradually backwards from there. If you start looking at, okay, we don't have enough trial signups to build a lookalike, so the next step back from that is like visitors to the website. That's usually when I'm like, okay, I probably wouldn't be running ads to those people, trying to get them to convert. Like, you can use content to help them, but I wouldn't be running like a lookalikes campaign to just website visitors expecting them to convert to a trial, because often that's when audiences become a bit messy.
Yeah, makes sense. And one of the things that I really love about PPC is that you can really use it in every kind of business, but specifically I love it with SaaS, and then also with e-commerce. We've had experience in the past because you can scale it, right? So when I'm talking scale, I'm talking taking it from $5,000 a month to $5,000 a day in ad spend, and see ROI across that. Can you share with our audience how your team is helping leverage that scalable channel with SaaS Companies marketing team, or are you taking their current PPC efforts and then taking it to a higher level to make it more effective?
Yeah, so most of the time when we come in, people have run some ads themselves or internally as a team, and their account structures are like a bit of a mess because they don't necessarily know what they're doing. Like, often we'll come in and people will be spending maybe $5,000-$10,000 a month on their ads or something like that, and they'll be like, okay, it's kind of working for us, but we're not really sure if it's working for us. Like, we don't actually know. That's one thing that comes up a lot, people not knowing their data. And sometimes we'll come in and they'll have had an agency previously. Very rarely do we come in where someone has a paid media specialist on their team and we work side by side with them. Like, that very rarely happens, to be honest. So yeah, usually we're coming in and taking the lead over everything. I think one of the areas where we really support the most too, and this is like important advice for any SaaS founders or marketers thinking about doing paid, is when you are going to do paid, whether you hire a freelancer, whether you hire someone to join your team full time, work with an agency, whatever, you need to consider you don't just need a paid media person. There's other things that you need. Like, you need someone that can create the designs, someone that can create and build the landing pages. You need a copywriter. Like, it's a whole little squad that you need to run paid ads successfully. So the way that we're kind of helping them scale their efforts and grow out is we'll usually come in at that point. We'll work with them on making sure their kind of data is as clean as it can be and they have as much insight into it as they possibly can. That's definitely a big issue for a lot of SaaS companies, is really understanding marketing data. I'd be lying if I said that all of our clients were very easily able to just see in one spreadsheet or in one tool, okay, we're spending this much on these different channels and this is the exact return. It's not as straightforward as that with the way that marketing works. But we're helping them just try and outlay, making sure we have our kind of KPIs very clearly set, showing them what's working, why it's working, identifying growth potential. That's the biggest thing. When people focus on ads, whether they work with an agency or not, what they really want is something that is scalable, like a scalable model. And usually the reason they don't achieve that is because they don't have, they're not running enough campaigns. They're not utilizing the data correctly. They're just chucking everything into one or two campaigns. So we'll come in and just try and build out an infrastructure within their advertising platforms that clearly shows, okay, this is what's working, this is why it's working, and this is how much we can then grow out off the back of that and start increasing our spend.
It makes sense. And then, so I know a lot of SaaS companies, maybe when they're setting up their campaigns, they struggle establishing like a baseline and measuring the performance effectively, mainly because I feel they change, or they leave it as is, or they cancel, or they modify the campaigns too early, right? They don't give it enough time to gather data. From your perspective, how often should you be testing and modifying the campaigns, and what kind of metrics or standards or general objective per campaign are you looking at before you make the change?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it is a challenging one to answer because it really depends on amount that's being spent, how campaigns are split, like lots of variables. But to give some pieces of advice, one thing that I would say is that if like make sure the metrics that you're focusing on are metrics that are actually important to the business, because a lot of times we'll come into an ads account and we'll see that if you log into the Google Ads account, the Facebook Ads account, and you see the overview screen that most people are frequently visiting, they'll see the number of conversions and it might be like a nice high number and the cost per conversion might be nice and low. But if those conversions are, let's say, micro conversions, so you're setting your conversions as pricing page visitors or like demo booking page visitors, etc., and not focusing on the metrics that actually are real kind of important conversions, that's one thing to note. So everyone has a different approach to this. And of course, different campaigns have different conversion objectives. I'm not saying it's not valuable to be tracking those micro conversions, but make sure when you're making budgeting decisions, optimization decisions, you're making those off the back of metrics that are actually important. So usually in the SaaS world, that is trial signups and demo bookings. I would say like purchasers, but a lot of the time people don't have enough in the SaaS world. People don't have enough volume to be like really optimizing towards purchases. Like in the e-commerce world, where there's going to be hundreds of purchases or like thousands, tens of thousands of purchases every single day, it gives Google, it gives Facebook, the other platforms enough data to really know what's going on. Most of, depending on the size of the SaaS company, of course, if they're like low ticket, low value, but high volume, they might have that. But usually we're looking at demo booked and trial sign up as the kind of decisions that we're making optimizations in the ads accounts off the back of. But then we'll be looking in the back end, like in our tracking sheets and everything else, we'll be looking at, okay, which of these campaigns have then led to actual people getting on calls, what stage are they at, how much pipeline has been generated in Salesforce or wherever else, etc. So often we'll make the optimization decisions in the accounts on those top level metrics of conversions, but then we'll be cross-referencing that with what happens in the back end. Now, to answer the question in terms of like how often should you be changing things, how much time should you wait to see results, we always say, of course, we try and, when you're running ads, you want to get results as quickly as possible. I always say to anyone, if they're considering running ads themselves, working with somebody, a freelancer, agency, whatever it may be, you really should commit at the very minimum to a 3-month test. Ideally, I would say like a 6-month test period too, just because if you're, let's say, most people might begin, if they're tentative and just starting ads for the first time, they might spend like $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month maybe. And if you're spending that over 3 months, that's really not that much money to collect a huge volume of data to make decisions off the back of. And what we'll see often is people will be tweaking their campaigns so often that each campaign might only have 1 or 2 conversions. And if you think about it, if you like zoom out for a second and you only have 1 or 2 conversions in the campaign, it's not really enough to tell you anything. And the whole reason why people start running paid ads is, yes, we want more signups, more revenue, but you want to identify a scalable channel and you want to know what's working and why it's working. And if you have this big spread of campaigns or different ad groups or ads that have just 1 conversion, no conversions, you don't actually learn anything whatsoever. So we always tell people to like actually like try and adjust things at the beginning as little as possible. Like there'll be a lot of learning that goes on. That's kind of a whole process in itself. But if you're the kind of person that you're going to run ads and you're going to spend a few thousand a month, like it's much better to go with a really simple account structure rather than try and be too complex. That's something a lot of people make the mistake. They'll start with a low budget and they'll try and test like 5,000 different things at the same time. Like you're much better to test 1 or 2 things and figure out what works that way than spread yourself too thinly.
Makes sense. And is there any instances and certain types of B2B SaaS companies that you see where you think running or setting up a PPC campaign isn't even a good strategy to consider for your marketing?
Yeah, I think everybody at the very minimum should have a remarketing flow and like a nurturing flow set up for whether it's signups that don't convert to paying customers, or people that are in the sign-up phase and haven't converted yet, or maybe even if people have entered card details, for example, but then dropped off, like a typical e-commerce, like abandoned cart style. I think everyone should have those set up at the very least, just purely because if we think about the buying process for someone that's buying software, they'll look at your website, they'll look at some review sites, they'll probably look at competitors, they might see competitor ads. Like you want to give yourself a chance by following up with them. So I would say everyone should have remarketing at the very minimum. Now, I don't think it makes sense for everybody to be running ads though. I think if you have a product with a low LTV, then it doesn't really make sense. Like if your LTV is maybe a couple $100 or like less than $1,000, it can become challenging to really see great returns from paid ads. Like you just have to question whether or not that's a good channel to look into. And then the other thing I would say, like we touched on a little bit earlier, most people, when they approach us and say, hey, look, we want to work with you, we want to run ads, a lot of the times we have to turn them away. It's not because they're not willing, like they want to spend money, they want to run the ads. But if your back-end systems aren't good, like if you have no understanding of your data whatsoever, if you don't have good nurturing flows, if your trial to paid conversion rate is really low, if your process for like, okay, maybe you have a higher ticket product and you're doing like sales calls, if the close rate from discovery call and then to demo call and then like demo to trying the product and then closing, if those rates are really, really low, you should probably focus on those things first before you look at running ads. So those are the kind of our usual pushbacks as to companies that I don't necessarily think it makes the most sense for.
Cool. So you said LTV below $1,000. How would you say now? How does the marketing campaign, would you change and affect how you approach it if the LTV values are different? Say, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000, or 10,000. What is it? How does it look differently?
Yeah. So usually the thing that we have to consider is, let's say, if we even go like larger numbers than that too. So like some of the clients that we work with are selling to the enterprise. Their software will be like a mid six figures annual recurring contract. Now for those guys, of course, we need to have a different approach to someone who is maybe a $59 a month software or $99 a month software. And so usually what that looks like is that often the larger your LTV, usually that means the longer your sales cycle or the more complex your sales cycle. And that usually means there are more people involved in the buying process. They're like larger companies, etc. And with those kind of companies, we have to approach paid slightly differently. Usually the things that change is just leveraging more content within our campaigns. So more of those guides, ebooks, but then also content that's answering common objections and tailoring in our campaigns based on the stages that your prospects are at. So people, like, you can use some tools like Segment. A lot of people know we use an alternative called Customer Labs, which is a SaaS product I really love, actually, like an early stage company out in India that has a Segment alternative. And so we can use tools like that to serve different ads to people based on what stage they're at within the CRM. So let's say you have HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever it may be. We can serve different ads to someone who is in the discovery stage versus someone who's already had a demo and is now like trying out the product. So when we get to those larger values, we start looking at more segmentation of our campaigns and more content versus if it's lower LTVs and a faster buying process, usually it's just our remarketing flows being set like usual. And then we tend to get pretty aggressive with expecting people to sign up on like first click after they've seen our ads. So if we look at the more enterprise focus, very rarely does it happen where we serve an ad, someone clicks the ad, they sign up or book a demo straight away. When we go and look into analytics, like there was a case today, for example, where one of our customers are like LinkedIn has this product called LinkedIn Elevate, which they're sunsetting. And one of our enterprise customers is like a perfect alternative to that tool. So we're going pretty aggressive on bidding against LinkedIn Elevate keywords right now. And there was an example today where someone saw the ad, they clicked through, they spent some time on the website, they left the site. They then came back 20 minutes later and then converted to booking a demo. And it shows as like an organic conversion, not a paid ads conversion, even though we know that paid had a huge role. So it's just thinking about how the role of paid media fits into the wider marketing team and strategy, depending on how your customers buy. That's like how you then adjust campaigns based on deal sizes.
Makes sense. I want to use kind of a quick example here just to kind of go back to that. Let's say you have an average LTV for a B2B SaaS company. Let's call it they're mid-market focused, right? So let's say 5,000 to 10,000. Their sales cycle takes 35 to 45 days, and from free sign up or trial to demo to paid sign up. How do you establish that baseline value to measure against the PPC performance? And can you run us through an example of how you'd approach to get this baseline structure of that campaign for specifically this case?
Yeah, for sure. I wish I could like create a Google sheet or something, right, to run through this. But like when we have specific numbers like that, you know what your sales cycle is, you know what your lead to demo to paid sign up rate is. When you're first starting the campaigns, you will just build out your kind of your KPIs or your objectives for the campaigns off the back of those averages that you have, right? So you would look at your data, let's say for the last year or the last 6 months, and collect those averages first. And then you'll know, okay, if we usually convert from website visitor to lead at this percentage, from lead to demo book to this percentage, from them to paid sign up at this percentage, you can then start factoring in, okay, how many people do we need in order to have one deal close kind of thing, and base it off the back of those averages. So working back from there. But then, so I would put that together in a Google sheet is how we would usually do things, is figuring out those. And then we'll start forecasting off the back of that, depending on the research that we do into the client on keyword costs and previous ads that they've run, etc. We'll build out something specific to each client based on those data points. So it's kind of hard on a general thing to say this is exactly what we would do. Or if you use some tools like Segment or Customer Labs I mentioned earlier on, you'll be able to set up those segments within those tools and then feed those audiences back into the advertising platform. So you'll be able to set conversions, and then you can set conversion values of, okay, if someone goes from this point to this point, the conversion is worth this much to us, etc. And so I would start from that point, and then over time, as you start getting real data coming through, because we know when you're forecasting, you can get as close as you want, but really you don't know what the real data is until the traffic starts running. So we would then be constantly kind of looking at the data that comes through over time. So yeah, if it's a sales cycle like that, 40 days, when you first start, you have to just work off the back of averages, because otherwise you're not you don't want to, you can't wait 40 days before you're deciding what your kind of objectives and targets are. So I would go off the back of averages first. Yeah.
Cool. And another part that SaaS companies were starting to looking to set up their PPC or start looking at that option. They're looking for help on setting up their budgets, right? How much should I be putting toward this? How do you suggest to these companies be thinking about setting up their budget for PPC to maximize the results while you still having to manage that aspect to be able to get enough data and generate enough revenue and prove yourself within that short period of time? So you said, yes, okay, look at this as a 3-month, 6-month commitment, but how much should I be putting in and thinking that I should be putting towards this to make it worthwhile for everybody?
Yeah, good question. So it does vary for depending on a number of factors. We have on our blog, we have a post that we put together, which is how to calculate your PPC advertising budget. So if anyone searches for SaaS ads budget or HeyDigital PPC ads budget, they'll be able to find that. And so we put in some top level calculations and things to think about, which is kind of similar to what we were talking about a little minute ago with regards to working back off of averages and average numbers that you have from deal conversion rates and everything else. What I would say is the way that we usually set budgets with our clients is if they've run ads before, then of course that gives us a bit more insight. But I know that this is never an easy kind of conversation for anyone. Is how do we plan a paid ads budget 3 months, 6 months in advance if we haven't run ads before? So usually what we'll do is we'll make sure you have a clear defined budget for the first month. We'll say, okay, this is the top line of what we're willing to spend, what we're willing to spend for that first month, and we'll build out a media plan off the back of that of, okay, these are all of our campaigns, this is how much each campaign is going to spend to fit in with that media plan. And then as time goes on, we'll then start collecting data and building out the real kind of budgets after that. So we'll usually begin with just setting a budget for the first month, a firm budget for the first month, and then setting kind of flexible budgets for month 2 and month 3 when we first begin, and adjusting those on the fly. It's not a super nice answer where it's okay, you just take this and you do this and you do this. But that's usually the way that we start looking at things. And I think when people are factoring in their budgets, you just need to think about, but if you're just getting started and you've never run any ads before, the first thing is figuring out, okay, you know what customers are worth to you. So if you decide to invest 10,000 a month, that's your top line, or 5,000 or 15, whatever it might be, just figure out, set some conservative estimations of, based on your conversion rates, it should then result in hopefully this many demos, or signups, but you're never going to know until things are up and running. So it's kind of challenging. And I think that's why sometimes people get a bit scared about running ads for the first time. Is as much as we like to plan and forecast, you never really get true numbers until ads are up and running, because there's only so much that you can trust, Google Search Console's data and Keyword Planner and everything else like that. So
exactly. Yeah. And what would you say, last question here to kind of adding to that, what would you say are the main reasons you see why SaaS companies, their PPC campaigns are either they've failed or they're just underperforming, as you continue throwing money at it over time?
Yeah, so usually it is people will try and test too many things at the same time with too small budget, like we talked about earlier on. So someone will be trying to test like 50 different things with a really tiny ads budget. So then their campaigns will have like 1 or 2 conversions per campaign or ad group, and it doesn't really give you anything to make decisions from. So that's definitely one major thing. Another major one is people running ads on social with really poor creative. So just running explainer videos or like really ad creative that no one is ever going to really care too much about and expecting it to perform well. I think that's one thing that we do really well with our clients is because we're so dedicated to quality design. Like we hired our video designer and like our design, or like one of our designers on our team, we made sure to hire someone from an e-commerce background because like she worked at an e-commerce agency. E-commerce companies crush it with ads. It's a huge part of their business model. So we wanted to kind of replicate that across the SaaS space. So that would be one other thing. And then I would say if we look at advertising platform specifics, usually people will jump into a Google Ads account and someone will have just thrown everything together in one campaign and have no, like, for example, they'll have what they think is all their main terms in one campaign, but then because it's just one general campaign, they'll have just general ad copies and like a general page that they're sending them to. So you have to make sure that when you're paying for search traffic, you want to make sure that the experience that the searcher has is like really relevant to what they're looking for. You don't want to waste money on someone. So if you're serving someone an ad about a specific kind of software or something that they've searched for, the ad copy needs to reflect that. The landing page needs to reflect that too. So that would probably be another thing. So just to kind of recap, I would say trying it, like spreading yourself too thinly and not committing enough time or budget, running really poor quality creative or not understanding how important creative is on the social platforms for ads. And then the final point just around not tailoring the experience for the searcher within Google specifically and just being too kind of generic with your approaches.
Love it. Makes perfect sense. So thank you so much for being on our show today, Dylan. How can our audience get in touch with you and learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, so I would say to them, if they want to learn more about HeyDigital, then they can just go to our website. So it's heydigital.co, and Hey is H-E-Y. Or I would really just recommend, I think because you and I both have similar audiences, I think a lot of people who are listening to this will find value in our podcast as well. So that's called the SaaS Marketing Show. You'll find that everywhere online. We interview marketing leaders at like successful SaaS companies. So we've had people from companies like Drift, ClickFunnels, Ahrefs, like all of the big players, and they come on and share like 30 minutes, really practical growth tips and strategies. So I would say those two places, or if they want to connect with me personally, they'll find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. That's where I'm active. So happy to answer any questions or connect with anybody there.
Awesome. We'll make sure to add those links in our show notes as well. Thank you so much again, Dylan. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. This is great.
Cheers. Thank you all for watching this episode and joining SaaS District today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes where we interview top leaders in the SaaS industry. If you're a SaaS company looking to grow and unlock the true value of your business, get in touch with us at Horizon Capital, and myself or one of our consultants will provide a free assessment to help you get there and hit your goals. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this podcast, please comment down below and help us improve our content for you all. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.